All right, welcome to episode 87 of Random Thoughts. So I thought today we could talk about something controversial that we have shied away from for a long time.
I can't believe it's taken 87 episodes.
The thing is, when you talk about something controversial, there'll be these people that just don't even listen to your full argument. They're just talking past you rather than even listening.
They'll read the title, they'll make a comment.
I haven't watched the video, I haven't listened, but I think blah, blah, blah.
And just for those out there not running Facebook pages or Instagram accounts, you'd be amazed when people go, hey, I didn't read your article, but... Or
I don't know what you're talking about, but...
It's if you want to... We love the conversation. The back and forth is brilliant. It helps us be better, helps you be better. But read the article, watch the video first, please.
Yeah. So I've been loath to do this, but... I figure it's a bit of a quieter time of the year. Maybe we can afford to.
Every time so for your sake as well, Durham, every time we go to do one of these episodes, it's the first thing that comes to mind. We should do this topic. We should do this one. And we did the deadlifting one. Yeah. We talked about the core lift and why we think that's a better idea. Yeah. I think it's finally time to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna lift a lid on why we don't squat as deep as some other people.
Yeah. And why deep squatting may not necessarily be the best thing for every athlete in every sport.
So before we kick off, I think it's important to be crystal clear that if you are a power lifter
or an Olympic lifter,
you have
CrossFit athletes as well.
You have to squat deep because the regulations and the requirements of the movements require that within your sport. So those guys, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. They have to squat deep, and you would never suggest they weren't to. And there may be some other sports. If you're in a scrum in rugby, I actually think
a deeper, wider squat would be beneficial.
You need to squat deeper. But there are certain sports where it's actually neither required nor beneficial for the physiology of those athletes. It's a horses for courses situation. Yeah. But I want to be clear that we're not saying you should never squat deep. It's going to be sport and athlete dependent.
Do we want to talk about the dogmatic side of that?
Yeah.
And the tradition-based reason that sort of people... Because the perceived perception, this is what I had when I came to this, is that it's not a squat unless you're below parallel. That's kind of the...
Yeah.
Anything less than that is faking it and get out of the gym, stop being a wuss.
And I mean, in part that comes from a lot of idiots in the gym doing these ridiculous tiny little... they load the weight up and they do these little epileptic fits under the bar, and they call that a set of squats.
Did you actually flex at the hips? Probably not.
Yeah. And so you look at that and you go, well, they're idiots. And people then go, well, therefore, everyone that doesn't do a full squat is an idiot. It's not...
It's another one of those binary cases. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not binary in the real world. So... Oh, sorry.
We're going to talk about tradition and how we've got to that point where people think the only type of squat is a full squat.
So the number one way we get to that point is that the people who are leaders and who are educating in the field in strength and conditioning very often go into the strength side of strength and conditioning because they have a deep, abiding love for lifting, because they are a power lifter or an Olympic lifter. And because they love it so much, what they do is, it's very human and normal, is they go, well, my sport requires X.
And I'm good at X.
And I'm good at teaching X. Therefore, everyone must do X. Whereas I think a better perspective is I think that's working your way backwards from your biases. What you like to do, therefore everyone needs that. And so the equivalent will be saying, I love hamburgers. I'm great at making hamburgers and eating hamburgers. Therefore, everyone should just eat hamburgers. It's like, no.
No, they're a vegetarian. They're people who don't like hamburgers.
Yeah. And so, it's not a case where it's everyone must do this. But I think that then what happens is it becomes almost like folklore. It's like, oh, well, you have to do this.
Because X said so and X is good at it.
Yeah, and the big thing that I think that you should be doing is you should actually be working your way forwards from what the sport and the athlete need.
First principles.
Yeah, what do we need to do to win this sport?
Go to first principles, and you should start from there and build up your exercise suite, your program, your periodization, whatever it might be, from the very first principles. Okay, the sport requires this. These are the movement patterns. This is what the athletes look like. This is their screening results. This is their blah, 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 and then you go from there.
And to some of them, it's going to be totally appropriate that they squat really, really deep. But I think not as many as people think. So my central argument around squatting has always been that you should squat as low as you should, in general, you should squat as low as you can whilst keeping a neutral spine.
And we're talking now about a loaded squat. So any squat where you've got a barbell on your back, in your hands, a goblet squat, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, people were squatting for hundreds of thousands of years to do a poo.
Yeah, this is the big one. Everyone's like, well...
Oh, it's natural.
And kids can do it. So like babies can squat deep.
So you should squat deep. It's like, yeah, but they're not doing it with 100 kilos on their back. No one was doing a poo whilst carrying their fat dad. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And they weren't doing it for multiple reps and like with the whole bracing. And
I mean, we've had an athlete who we sent over to the States in amazing physical condition to the college system there. And their college coach has a rule that you must squat until your calves touch your hamstrings.
It didn't count unless that happened.
Yeah, and that's not particularly good for anyone. But it works a little better if you're an enormous bodybuilder. Like my friend JD. So JD had the biggest hamstrings, has massive hamstrings, and he's got massive calves. They meet when he's at 99. You know?
Yeah, so whereas for like a skinny distance runner, that's going to take so much range of motion to get to.
A tall athlete, yeah. So you don't have to.
Yeah, and so should we talk... We've got a little lost in excitement here. Should we talk about what's wrong with squatting deep?
Okay, sorry, yes, thank you.
What can go wrong if you don't have the ability to get deep?
And also what's not going to go right. So the underpinning philosophy about the neutral spine thing is if we round our back, if we lose neutral, so when we're standing we have a natural curvature of the spine. As we squat down...
Got an article on... Sorry to interrupt. Got an article on neutral as well, so we'll link that.
So as we squat down, what happens is the butt tucks under and rounds out. And yes, you can do more adductor magnus work to loosen that off. Yes, you can work more on your ankle mobility, but there's still a limit that most people over 6 foot find that limit a bit early because they've got longer femurs. Yep. So as you lose neutral, what happens is the glutes switch off. They're in a position of biomechanical disadvantage and they just don't work as well. And B, you're transferring the stress from your muscular structures to your disc
and your ligamentous structures.
Yeah.
So that not only the disc, but the ligaments of your spine and your SIJ and your hips start getting wound up.
Yeah. And so to me, the benefits of going, and people will say, oh, but you can't activate the glutes properly. It's like, actually, that's just like religious talk. If you look at EMG analysis, you have maximal glute activation actually just before 90 degrees.
Just above parallel is what happens. So it's just like that same position that most people go for a two-legged vertical leap. Yeah. It seems to be about the point of peak glute EMG.
And so it's you are going to less effectively work the glutes. You are going to preferentially over-recruit adductor magnus, and you are going to stress out your discs. And people get very upset when you talk about that because they say, "Oh, but I've been doing it 20 years and I'm fine." I'm like, "Well, yeah." Plenty of people can do it all the time and they'd be fine.
It's like we talked about last week. If you do 2 running sessions 2 days in a row, it's not like you instantly explode with a stress fracture.
What happened to Jacob? He died. His body exploded.
He squatted below parallel. How dare he? It's an accumulative thing, and it may not happen while you're squatting.
And it may not happen ever. You might go your whole life and go perfectly well with it, and that's fine. But
it's still gambling.
Because we're all about finding the best way to get in the best shape you can get for your specific needs. And most of the time, the best way is actually going to be doing a really good weight for as good a range of motion as you can get, maintaining a really nice alignment. And if you're shorter and with great mobility, like all the older lifting people are,
and all the powerlifters are,
powerlifters occasionally get a tall guy that's really good.
Yeah, good levers.
Yeah. Then that's great. But if you're, a different population where you've maybe got a really long femur, you've got really tight dorsal, that's a bony restriction that can't be changed through mobility drills.
People with like things like FAI and different shapes, is it retrograde or anterograde hips with the funky
the Celtic hip, and there's all these different types of hips.
Hip and stuff like that. If your hip joint faces in a different direction, as you squat, it'll close up earlier.
Yeah. And so I think the best strategy is where you still chase range of motion, but you do unloaded range of motion. So we do what we call our ROM squat, our range of motion squat. Get almost as low as you like on that one. But when you're having heavy weights,
And we do that body weight. Yeah. So we do that just with body weight.
when you're having heavy weights, I think you want to shorten up your range to get the maximum advantage out of the weights with the minimal possible risk. So that risk reward equation is really in your favor.
And you keep working. It's not like, so we use the seats.
Yeah.
So it's not like, you're a 10-seat squatter, that's you for life. If you've got restricted dorsey, it's not like, you've got a restricted dorsey, bugger. We keep working on that aggressively. But we're not going to do it also while chasing heavy loads on a flex spine.
Yeah. So
it's places, and so you wouldn't mix your mobility and strength work. So it's the same thing here. Chase our mobility with our rehab work or our homework or whatever it might be, and then we'll chase the strength, and then eventually they'll come together.
Don't try and make a casserole. Don't try and do 7 different things out of one exercise. Oh, this is for fitness and mobility and strength and agility. No, it's not.
Now it's just messy.
It's just crap. You're doing all 4 things crappily.
Yeah,
Not a word, but
we'll take it.
I think the advantage of that shallower squat where it's still deep. I mean, it's deep enough to get to neutral.
Most of our athletes are still getting to at least 90 degrees of knee flexion.
90 degrees, that's great. You get so much benefit. Talk about the study that we were discussing before.
Yeah, so there's some research before. I'll find the Instagram infographic with it and a link to the actual article that they did. The problem with all the studies around squats is they'll often compare a deep squat with a half squat, but they'll do the same weight.
Yep.
So the same weight on a full squat is very intense, but on a half squat would be quite
too
easy.
Right, yeah.
This study, what they did is they did a quarter squat, which is probably about 60 to 70 degrees of knee flexion. They did a half squat, which would be about 90 to 100 degrees of knee flexion.
Yep.
Then they did full powerlifting, 110 degrees of knee, closed knee, proper stuff. And they did relative load. So you would go as hard as you can at those 3 weights. So the quarter squat guys were going super heavy, but barely any range of motion. Then they tested vertical leap before and after and 40-yard dash, I think it was.
Okay.
The quarter squat group crapped all over, just destroyed the other 2 groups.
Yeah.
And the full squat group basically had no change in their speed because strength is joint angle specific.
Yeah.
And so if you're squatting deep, you're getting the most intense work right at the bottom where it's at the hardest. Whereas with the quarter squat and the half squat, you're squatting in range of motion where you're going to get that peak glute activation we mentioned before. But also sprinting and jumping are very much about having stiff and sprung legs and a straighter leg. So you're creating force with that leg very open and very straight. And so you want to be creating force closer to that.
Yeah.
So your quarter squat, half squat is much more reflective of that. Whereas something like a rugby scrum on the other side of things would be more suited to a deeper squat because you need that force at a deeper joint angle.
Yeah.
So it's horses for courses.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where people it's very difficult to make that case because a real powerlifting squat. I call it a real squat then because that's how I think of it. Like that's a real squat.
Full depth squat.
Full depth squat has tremendous. It looks cool. It's a great exhibition of strength and mobility. There's so much benefits to it. But if it's putting your body under a risk when you're playing your other sport, if it's making you less effective at chasing the quality you're chasing,
if it means every 6 weeks you got a grumpy back, or you do a disc when
interrupting
you're 35.
your SIJ. But the big thing is, it's just about getting what's the most effective way to get to where you need to be. And I think that's the critical thing. People will often vary up their different types of squat as well. I think that's really good. I think to just do only one depth ever, like to just do a shallower squat exclusively. I think
just do quarter squats for the rest of your life.
I think it's silly. You should be doing some deeper ones. You should be doing some mid-range. You should be working the muscles across different ranges and positions. It's just being always cognizant of how much do you protect the athlete. And the other thing that I often think about when talking about this is you can exercises aren't sacred. You can modify an exercise and you can make it better for that person in that situation.
Yeah, just because you read it from a thing or you saw it on a course doesn't mean that is the set in stone way it has to always be done.
Like bench press range. Like maybe for some people a floor press. We don't do floor press much because I just don't like it and it's awkward. But maybe for some people that's going to...
We use it occasionally when we get some shoulder niggles,
Yeah. But you can modify stuff. Like in every other facet of our lives, innovation and modification are linked with technology, progress, and intelligence.
And better results.
No one's saying, oh my God, you're such a wuss with your knife and your fork.
Use your hands. Or no one's going, oh, smartphone, you got no buttons, loser.
Well, some people did at the start. But it seems to be that there's this really frowned on exercise modification. And part of it's because people take modification too far and they end up going so far away from the original thing.
And then become a bit crazy.
Like they're doing a back squat standing on a Swiss ball. Well, that's a stupid modification. That's just asking for trouble. That's not a good modification. Not all modifications are created equal. But some enable you to get all the benefit, if not more benefit.
Well, in this case, definitely more benefit based on this research.
With less risk. Yeah. So we've done it. We've talked about it. Prepare the floodgates of and it's actually, we're probably going to be fine because I don't think that many CrossFitty people, because they're the ones that get most upset about it.
Yeah. The deep squat is not sacred. It doesn't have. You don't have to feel bad that you can't get to full range of motion. Squat what you can.
And always work on your mobility.
I'm always working to get a little deeper. So my front squat I can get quite a lot lower than my back squat. I'm trying to work on that back squat to level them out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm thinking about, all right, I'm going to be lifting now. I'm going to be able to coach for the next 30 years of my life. I want to be an athlete for as long as possible, not just the best athlete possible.
Yeah.
But so the partial, it's not very exciting. The partial range of motion squat as low as you can while maintaining neutral spine is not very
mouthful. It's not catchy.
Not very catchy, but it's safer.
Yeah.
It seems to be more effective when it comes to jumping and running athletes. And it allows you to go heavier. You can put more weight on it too.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fun.
There's a lot of good stuff. Closing thought. It's interesting.
Should we touch on stance width before we close?
Okay.
Just quickly.
So, back when I was a young man with a head full of hair and no idea.
Don't have a great head full of hair too.
Those are the good old days. Yeah. Anyway, I started training athletes, and I had everyone doing relatively wide stance. Like it was more like a powerlifting stance. Because that's what I'd taught and that's what I'd seen everyone do, and it was easy to get lower with that.
Following the common.
I was just following along what the sort of the hand-me-down
thinking.
Yeah. And then my mentor, Bruce, said to me, "Why are you having everyone's feet so far apart? Does anyone ever run like that?" And I was like, "No, they run." He's like, "Where do they run? They run with their feet under the hips." He's like, "Well, I reckon maybe you should think about having them strong with their feet under the hips."
Where they're going to be running, jumping, and landing.
Yeah. And you know, there's so much that Bruce has given me, but because that wasn't just applicable to that thing. Like I was like, because you know, like I'm in my late 20s, and I was like mind blown. You know what? Because it made total sense as he applied it to that particular example. But then all of a sudden I started looking at, there's all these assumptions I've been making that we have to do all these things, and he's blown it with just that one little weird thing. Yeah. So yeah, if you are forced to go as deep as you can go, then you should go wide because it's easier to get lower. But
and it also allows you, what they also talk about in powerlifting, is it allows you to sort of bounce off your ligaments. They talk about bouncing out of the hole. Yeah. And that's not a good thing to do. Do not treat your back like a rubber band.
I had a friend of mine, and I remember he was coaching another friend of mine, and he said to her, "Imagine your back is like," this is with deadlifts. He said, "Imagine your back is like a rubber band." That was his cue. Yeah, and so not the best cue. No, you want to learn to keep the spine stiff and straight. You want to develop that ability to maintain the integrity of your core whilst everything else is moving fast. That's the
fast
trick.
Or creating force.
Yeah.
So to finish up with width. So our width is we go just outside hip width.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll vary. Sometimes people just can't get a good shape with that, and we'll go, you know what, go a little wider.
Or go a little narrower sometimes even, for really tall kids.
Yeah.
As a rule, that seems to be the sweet spot.
It seems to work really well, yeah. And then as you're going wider, obviously you're getting more adductor work, which is good and bad, I think.
Yeah, mixed.
Yeah, that's because we will do an adductor magnus one at some point.
Yeah, I think once we know a bit more, because we're still
early days,
learning so much more about that.
Some interesting stuff there though. So my take-home message is, the number one thing is video yourself squatting where you can see your body angles
side on,
and actually determine how low you can get whilst maintaining neutral. Because it's amazing how many people tell you, I squat to neutral, and then you video them, they go, see that butt tucking under? You don't.
And do it under something heavy too. because people tend to cheat the most under something moderately heavy. So if you're
you're used to doing
if you're
something,
normally going heavy, so if you're currently squatting 100 kilos, testing on 20 isn't going to tell you anything. You need to be at least 60, 70, 80% of what you're maximally going at the moment to tell you whether you're going to need buckle
I
pads.
thought you were suggesting
Everyone go and do 1 RMs. Don't do 1 RMs. No, definitely don't do that.
And what's interesting too is if you do that, and if you do shorten up a little bit that range so you get into the neutral position, take a notice of your DOMs.
Glute DOMs, yeah.
Because what I noticed was I got way more glute DOMs when I started doing that, and way less adductor DOMs, and just felt better. And the other example I think that's really interesting, was the comparison between Essendon Football Club and North, where Essendon had Dean the Weapon Robinson's philosophy of big is beautiful, and that was just squat enormous weights like a powerlifter. And they had the highest soft tissue injury in the history of the AFL. At the same time, but no one ever talks about it, North Melbourne under Steve Saunders, who's a physio, he banned back squats. And I think he's brilliant, but he probably threw out the baby with the bathwater.
That might be a bit too extreme, yeah.
And they had the lowest soft tissue injury rate in the history of the competition.
They did a partial range of motion belt squat.
Yeah, and I think that's taking it a little too far. I think the middle ground is actually where, as is so often the case, is where the sweet spot is, where you're getting tremendous benefit with almost no risk. If you chase zero risk, if you're totally risk allergic, you never can have any risk. Well, you just sit really still in a room. You can't go too far with that. You've got to find the sweet spot where it's a really low risk and really high benefit.
Find that sweet spot, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
It's done. There it is.
Hopefully, if you see people, here's the thing, let's try and lighten the work for you. If you see people on our page saying, I haven't read the article, but...
Or haven't watched the video, but...
Don't swear at them, but feel free to call them on it.
Yeah, unfortunately our page blocks swears for this one. I'd like to unblock for this one in particular. But yeah, say maybe like, kindly watch the video before...
in all seriousness, our cultural thing on our social media is we try to always behave as though we're at a dinner party.
Yep.
Someone asks a question, you politely answer it and
have a discussion.
And have a discussion as though it's two people talking to each other. Yeah.
So if you could respect that and come back on it the same way, that would be great for us.
That'd be lovely, and we all have a nice time. So resources wise, I wrote a very old article about squat depth
and glute activation.
Glute
They're both really good with regards to this.
I haven't read them, so I don't know.
No, they're still good. I've been reading them, yeah. The neutral spine article and video is pretty decent.
I like your neutral spine video.
It's a good video. It's a fun video. I like that one. And what else have we got? We got the deadlift one. I think I'll link to the deadlift versus core lift, because I think that's very real. If you liked this, you'll also like that podcast.
If you hated this, you will hate that. Don't go watch it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what I want to say is it's all about trying to look at ways to modify and innovate where needed. Not for the sake of modification and innovation, but where it's beneficial and appropriate.
Nice.